Hey, what's up guys? JB here. So Trials of Reckoning is now over here on Global, and Gumi is hitting us with yet another PvE event this week, and we're going to be going into guild raids. If this is your first guild raid, or maybe the first one that you were thinking about competing in, I have made a couple of guides previously on this topic, and I will actually be putting links to both of those in the description below. So take a look at those if you're interested and kind of get a primer for yourself on all things guild raid. That said, I did kind of want to continue what I had started there with the foundation of those videos, and I have come up what turned out to be a real project for myself in today's video. But I do actually at the end of the day feel like it will be pretty helpful, not only for myself but you guys out there. And what I've come up with is version 2, so to say, of those elemental cheat sheets that I had put together for the last guild raid. And again today I will be ranking all of the elements on my own sort of personal tier list, kind of where I see them standing in the guild raid hierarchy, kind of comparing them against one another. So with that said guys, let's just kick it off. First though, let me just talk about how I have set these up. I have made 2 cheat sheets for each and every element. The first one that you see here is going to be dedicated towards the chaining capabilities, with the second one is actually going to be covering all of the relevant debuffs for the particular element. And we're going to be starting with fire here today. And on the left side of this cheat sheet, I have marked down, what I've come to call native chainers, for these elements. And what that means is that they have some chaining capability innately, either within their main job or within their sub-job kits. Now on the right side, you're going to see the 3 vision cards that we have access to. Exorcist, a gift like no other, and then the third one, which is the Nightmare Before Halloween, which literally is just come out on Global. And there next to the cards, you can see the various units which can take advantage of those cards and kind of get those 3-hit chaining abilities added into their kits. Now just sort of continuing with the groundwork here, I have not listed each and every single unit that has access to those cards, or each and every unit that even has access to chaining within the elements, but I have actually covered the vast majority of them, and certainly what I feel are the most relevant ones, for the various elements. That said, I am human, just like everyone else, so if you do see any glaring omissions or kind of big units or abilities that you think that I missed here in the sheets today, definitely go ahead and pop a note for me down below, and I will go ahead and update the master sheets accordingly. Speaking of that though, I will once again be making all of these infographics that we look at here today available to publicly download, so that you can share those with your friends or amongst the community on your Discord servers and kind of use them as a reference going forward. And I do plan to put both a PDF version and PNG versions, for your convenience. Now another thing that you'll notice on the sheets here is that I have separated the native chainers by how many hits that they have access to, within their kits, as well as, which damage type, those chains are relevant for. Some units even have chaining in multiple different damage types. One other thing that you might notice on the sheets is a future designation, and that I think is pretty self-explanatory, but basically that means that that unit will be coming, sometime in the future, or maybe that particular unit has some enhancements coming in the future which may give them additional capabilities. And in terms of the rundown today, I'm just going to kind of quickly iterate, on the thoughts that I originally had in the last video, kind of go over any new additions that have come in for the elements since we last spoke about guild raids, or any other changes that may be going on, within the scene. Alright guys, so that is enough in terms of the setup. Let's actually just talk specifically about fire now and what's going on for the elements since my last guild raid video. And at least in terms of the native chaining side, not really much is going on here for fire that we didn't already have the last time that I did a video. We actually did just get the free MR unit Revelka for fire recently, and she does have a 2-hit missile attack, which is fine enough. But probably the biggest news going on for fire is going to be the addition of Delita and having his EX jobs and having him be a more viable choice now for fire guild raid teams. And of course he's particularly viable if you have the Exorcist vision cards, which would give him access to 3-hit chaining. Now I do actually think that fire is helped quite a bit by this new vision card, the Nightmare Before Halloween, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about that in the next section, which is kind of talking about debuff capabilities. But I have listed, some good candidates that I think could use this card here, and I think that Adelard or Regalia Glaciella are probably going to be the 2 best options here for fire. But barring any global exclusives coming in for the elements, we're only actually aware of one future unit coming in for fire on the JP side, and that is going to be Sorrow from the Dragon Quest collaboration that they had, about a month ago. Now Sorrow is going to be a native 2-hit chainer. He's got a 2-hit slash attack that he can use, and he can actually get 3-hit chains if you give him the Gift Like No Other vision card. Looking at sort of the totality of the situation here for fire in terms of chaining, I think they're in a pretty good situation. They have that 4-hitter there in Luartha. And then they have the core slash chainers there with King Mont and Rain and Vildaira. And it is certainly nice that that core trio of fire chainers is part of the permanent pool that, anybody can get access to, at any time. All right, let's move into the second style of infographic here, and this one is going to be all about the debuffs. And I have separated here, by category, what have been the most relevant debuffs for guild raids, up to this point. So you can see here, we have elemental and unit resistant perils, we have agility down, we have slow, we have defense and spirit breaks, and then of course, damage type imperils as well. At this point, I have limited those damage type imperils to just slash and missile. Now, other damage type imperils is something that could be more relevant, as we push into the future with guild raids, but I think at least as of right now, the most common ones that you'll be using out there will be these two. Now, a couple of notable debuffs that I will point out for you guys here, and one is going to be that all elements in peril. And thus far, this has primarily been a green mage type ability. It's not a debuff that we have really seen all that much thus far in guild raid play, but I think that it is going to carry maybe a little bit more relevance as we push into the future. And the main reason for that is that green mages are now a viable chaining choice, with that new vision card that we spoke about briefly. Of course, one of the nice things about an all elements in peril is that it will layer and stack with your element's main source of imperil, in this case fire. So it does give you an avenue to maybe push your damage a little bit higher if you need it. Now, this final category I do want to explain a little bit. It is a new category that I'm calling Chain Extension, and this was a capability that we saw introduced with Flagbearer Glaciella recently. And she is currently the only unit in the game that has that. But we will actually talk a little bit more about that once we get into the wind section. Now, on the very right side of the infographic here, I am including a couple more sections. And the first one is the chain cap vision card, if there is one available to the elements. And remember that if that element has their own mono element version of this card, it will stack with the multi-element effective version, which is the two-headed dragon card, so that you're able to actually increase your cap damage by up to 5,000. Now, the last section of the infographic here is going to be for key summons that are going to help you out on your guild raid teams. Remember that these espers are a pretty big part of this guild raid gameplay. When they're summoned, they provide a field effect which will greatly increase your attack and magic, and they do actually drop another imperil on the field which will stack with any others that you previously put on. Alright guys, so that is the setup now in terms of the debuff infographic, but let's actually touch on some highlights here specific for fire. In terms of the elemental imperil Delita, he has a 48% fire imperil. That is super nice. Actually, only 2 units in the entire game have that level of an imperil. If you don't happen to have Delita, Rain is another great option. On his limit burst, he actually has a 2-hit fire imperil of 38%. And I can actually see in some instances where this one actually may be preferred, just because it is that multi-hit ability, but it kind of actually comes down to that point about what else you have access to in the element. Overall though, pretty good coverage here for debuffs in terms of fire. One area though that they have been lacking is that single target or unit resistance break. So I think that's one area where the new vision card can actually help them out quite a bit. Even though the chain from that vision card is magic based, and of course magic damage doesn't chain on its damage type, but if you're able to apply enough relevant debuffs to the boss, at some point you're going to be able to cap your damage just based on element alone. So I do think that this vision card could actually end up being pretty relevant for fire. In terms of the chain cap vision card and summons, no real changes there for fire. Brachiosaur I think is going to remain your best summon to use with Ifrit as a backup, and then the King Mont vision card here for that 2500 damage cap. You're going to want that in all of your fire guild raid parties. Alright guys, so now that we know all about the setup, for the various infographics that I put together, the remaining elements actually should move much quicker. Before we actually move on to the next element though, let's actually look where fire is going to rank on my elemental tier list. And do remember that this tier list is specifically for their guild raid viability. Now last time I had fire ranked, sort of just inching over into my S rank, and that was sort of on the heels of Sweetheart Ildira, just sort of being released recently here on global. Since then, there really hasn't been too many changes for fire, as we sort of just went over. So I'm going to say that they are going to be staying put here in my S rank, still very capable, I'd say, when it comes to guild raids. I think at this point to sort of progress fire, beyond this rank, I would probably need to see, maybe a new chaining mechanic introduced for them, or perhaps maybe another powerful 4-hit chainer coming in for the elements. All right, the ice element is going to be up here next. And, in terms of native chaining, ice is doing very, very well. We've actually gotten a couple of notable upgrades here recently on global, and that's going to be 2 new missile chainers, in McLeod and Eliza. And McLeod in particular is going to be bringing ice its first 4-hit chainer. And that's super nice because this unit is actually free for everyone. Now, as soon as next week, we actually could be seeing Alaya as well. She is actually another 3-hit missile chainer that will be coming in for ice. And very quickly, we'll have ice here being sort of a missile juggernaut, when it comes to guild raids. And I think assuming that you have everyone available here for ice, it is definitely going to be the best option to go, in terms of you chaining your damage type. Of course, always check the resists, of the boss that you're up against. They can certainly play a huge role in sort of the team that you're putting together. Now, in terms of the new vision card that we just got here for Halloween, I think that it could open maybe a couple of interesting options for the elements. Notably, Mediena and Shell are a couple that are coming to mind here in their early goings. But we will actually be seeing a new unit in Zoma coming in the future, again as part of that Dragon Quest collaboration, and he's able to use this vision card as well. So definitely very nice overall chaining coverage here for ice, and definitely one of the strengths for the elements. All right, looking at the debuffs here next for ice, and again we're going to have very nice coverage here across the board for ice. We have multiple sources of a 38% elemental imperil. Now, when the slow debuff is applicable in your particular guild raid, Barrett is going to be super good in that situation. His slow debuff actually comes packaged along with the 30 defense break, so having 2 relevant debuffs, in one skill is pretty rare, and it definitely will help your efficiency quite a bit. Now, you may have noticed this counter icon here on a couple of the units here in the infographic, and basically what that means is that this unit has a counter ability which can proc that particular debuff type. Now, if you're actually able to apply a relevant debuff, without actually taking any actions at all, it really doesn't get any much better than that when it comes to guild raids. Of course, though, at that point you are at the mercy of RNG, so there is that to factor in. Now, in terms of unit resistance down for ice, they actually already had a source of that in Aranea that we got from Final Fantasy 15. However, I do know that a lot of people skipped her and don't have access to her. We did actually get a couple of new sources of this particular debuff for ice, and that's going to be Snow on his main job sub, as well as Eliza from her Ranger sub job. Of course, another option would be that new vision card that we just got from Halloween if you happen to pick that one up. Now, Ice does have its own elemental damage up card in Trembling Heart that came just after Velis was released. And the best summon options for the elements are going to remain either Freezes or Maniple. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty good situation here for Ice. I will say though that you could be lacking in some power if you weren't able to pick up some of these limited units. Specifically Aranea and Barrett, I think they are 2 of the better options for Ice. Alright, so where am I seeing Ice then, on my tier list? Now, in my last video, I did sort of have them towing the line between the A and the S rank. Well, with the new additions, specifically, in terms of the new missile chaining capability, and with those units also being part of the permanent pool or freely available, I think there has been a significant bump in power for the ice elements when it comes to guild raids. So I am going to have them firmly in my S rank now. I think that they're really on solid ground at this point, and they're definitely going to be able to hold their own, when their element is applicable for the particular guild raid. And I think really that is the bar, for my S rank here, is that, that particular element is going to be able to take care of business and kind of get you the best scores, when their elemental weakness is in play. That way another element isn't swooping in and sort of taking the title away from you. Alright guys, let's move on to the wind element next. And in terms of native chaining, wind is actually the only current element that has access to 2 4-hit chainers. And that is going to be Lucia and Tifa. Now actually one of my knocks against the wind element the last go around is that, this actually made them very top heavy when it came to chaining, and they didn't really have a lot of other native 3-hit chainers to back them up in that area. Now, since my last guild raid video, Wind actually has picked up another 3-hit chainer that they can throw in there, and that is going to be one of the very best PvE units that we have seen in the game to date, and that is Flagbearer Glaciella. She is just a huge addition for the element, and I think is going to make them very, very competitive. Now, in addition to that, we do have a unit to look forward to here in the future, and that is Charisse. She is going to be coming in within maybe in the next couple of months. She is a native 3-hit missile chainer, and she is actually a very nice low 70 cost unit. Now, if you picked up the new vision card A Nightmare Before Halloween, I'm going to say a great new addition for your wind chaining team is going to be Sodali. Of course, he was already around and has been in the game for some time now, but this new vision card I think is going to make him a serious contender for a starting spot on your wind squad. And he may very well be one of the best options. Why exactly do I say that? Well, let's dive into the wind debuffs chart here next and let's take a look. So assuming that you did pick up that new vision card, Sodali can now slot in as your main element in peril. And next to Delita, he is the only other unit in the game that has access to that large of an imperil. Now, if you don't have Sodali or you didn't pick up the new vision card, Flagbearer Glassy is another good option. And if you don't have her, Howlet is probably going to be the best choice at that point. Now, in our last guild raid, really the only wind unit that had access to a unit or single target resistance break was June. But in addition to the new vision card, wind actually did pick up a couple other new options here for that particular debuff, and that is going to be Lucia. She did get the ranger job enhanced, and within that job she does have access to the mega charge skill. In addition to that, within 3 to 4 months we are going to be seeing sniper job upgrades, and Core will at that point will pick up his single target resistance break at that point as well. I did just want to highlight these options here for wind, just because I think this is a very, very important debuff for them. They are trying to mix many different damage types together to form their chain. Now, wind actually has picked up a new summon as well with Dark Tetra. It's more or less equivalent, to Typhon in terms of its power and its field effect, but it actually can be a little bit easier to cap the damage with it because it does have an additional imperil on the summon effect only. Another highlight for the wind element currently is Flagbearer Glaciella's Limit Burst that we did touch on a little bit earlier. Now, the latest iteration for guild raids is just launching, so I really haven't had too much of an opportunity to test this out just yet, but I would say that its effect is highly relevant when it comes to guild raid play, in that it actually allows you to continue your chain on the enemy even if that enemy has moved and taken a turn. So it allows you to keep those stacks of your chain and those additional modifiers that are going to help you keep your damage up at a high level. That limit burst is just a single hit though, so I'd say there certainly is some math there to do and some mocking to do to see if that is going to be the best option for you, within your guild raid runs. But I would say it is a very nice tool and capability to have, if we happen to need it down the road. So that said, where do I see wind sitting in the current guild raid hierarchy? Now, the last go around, I actually had wind sitting in my A tier, but with this new vision card releasing and that sort of unlocking Sodali and sort of what he can bring to the table for guild raids, and that, in addition to Flagbearer Glaciella, a significant native chainer that's been added, and then having those things on top of what was already a great core of 2 4-hit native chainers, I'm going to say wind is jumping up, 2 spots for me, and I'm going to have them skipping over the S tier and going right into SS tier. I think with what we touched on, the capabilities sort of speak for themselves, and I think that we're going to be seeing some great guild raid scores out there for wind, so I really can't wait to see that. What are some areas for improvement, for the element that, we could be looking for in the future? I think at this point it's going to be new units that are coming in to flesh out certain damage types for the elements, maybe help keep some pure chains together. As we said a little bit earlier, wind is really trying to mix a lot of different disparate damage types together, and sometimes that can be a little tough in the early goings of your guild raid. On top of that, maybe condensing some of the debuff coverage and having maybe some 2-in-1 type debuff skills like we've seen on some other elements. I think those kind of things, though, are really what every element is looking for at this point, and certainly would be helpful for pretty much anyone. So, wind is really, I think, among the cream of the crop and one of the better elements that we have right now in the game. All right, let's move on to the earth element next. And when it comes to the earth element, really not all that much has been going on with it for the better part of a year now. We really haven't been seeing any new releases or new vision cards, outside of Queen Macherie. However, Earth actually did pick up a new EX job with Mustadio, and I'd say that he is pretty relevant, when it comes to guild raids. He does actually have a 3-hit attack. Since my last video, Summer Lilith also picked up some upgrades with the Ranger enhancements, and she does have that 4-hit skill from her dual gunner subjob that she's always had as well. In the short future, we are looking forward to Yual coming into the game, and she has a 3-hit physical strike attack that she can add in and mix into your Earth teams as well. Aside from those, though, we have this sort of core / chain group of Earth chainers that we've had in the game for some time now, and that's consisting of Winter Venera, Noctis, Ketone, Moraga, and Zazan. And when guild raids first started up, this was one of the best, if not the best, guild raid team out there. and it still does remain very strong to this day. Now the new vision card, I'm not sure it's helping out Earth's situation as much as some of the other elements out there. Although, maybe it could if you don't have access to some of these core units here on the screen. But, let's take a look at the actual debuffs and kind of see why I feel that way. Now, looking at the debuffs here for Earth, in terms of the Earth Elemental in peril, I think Winter Venera is probably the top choice. Although I think Eileen actually can be pretty decent too if you don't happen to have her. She is actually able to use both the Exorcist and a gift like no other vision cards. Now, Moraga is a pretty big asset for the elements. He is, of course, a free selection quest unit, and he is actually one of the only units within the element that has access to the slow debuff, which can be very, very important for guild raids. Now, as of today, Earth actually does have a couple of sources for a unit resistance and peril, which is actually one of the reasons why I'm not as excited for the new vision card specifically for Earth. But I'll have to kind of play around with it and mox a bit and kind of see how it's working out. There is actually some potential there that Queen Macherie could slot in and be pretty effective. She does actually have that 38% Earth and Peril on her limit burst as well. And if you were able to use that, in addition to the 3 hits that you get from the vision card, it could free up Ketone, for example, maybe to just be a pure chainer at that point. Just something I'm going to need to play around with a little bit more and kind of see what is optimal. We can see Noctis is heavily involved in the debuffing picture here as well. One of the coolest things about Noctis, though, is actually his limit bursts. Not only is it imperiling the slash damage type, but it is also imperiling pierce and strike damage as well. So, with some of the other units that are in the picture here for Earth, it can actually enable them quite well. Oberon's actually another notable one that we'll touch on here real quickly. In addition to gaining 3-hit chaining, from the vision cards, he can actually bring a very unique aspect from his limit burst. He can actually give you a all elements in peril similar to the Green Mage ability. And he's actually the only one in the game that's able to do that, outside of the Green Mage job. And remember that those do stack with your main elements and perils, so it can really enable you to do some big damage if you have both of them layered on. So pretty decent debuff coverage here for Earth. They have a little bit of everything. They are picking up a new summon though with the Sheraton Esper that got released alongside Queen Macherie. Eleficaris is still going to be your preferred summon though if you have access to it. And that is because it is one of the few summons in the game that has a multi-hit summon ability. And this one is a 2-hit pierce attack. So it is definitely a nice asset for the element that, even within their summon action, they're able to get a multi-hit there as well. My main problem for Earth right now though when it comes to guild raids is the vision card situation. They don't currently have their own mono element version of a max damage increase card. So they are actually forced to use the 2-headed dragon card that you see pictured here. And basically what that means is that they have to stack that with an MR card, which in this case would be Mind Flayer, in order to increase their damage. And because they are using an MR card there, that means their max damage cap is going to be 500 less than, any other element which has a mono element version of these cards. Now 500 damage, doesn't sound like a lot, in a vacuum, but, when you're adding that up, across 75 or 100 hits or whatever it ends up being, it does actually end up being quite a bit of damage, when all is said and done. So in my last video, I had Earth sort of firmly entrenched in my S tier. But because that capability really hasn't progressed very much at all, since we last spoke on this, I am actually going to have to slightly downgrade Earth here. And I think that's mainly going to be on the back of, not picking up any max damage vision card, in addition to just the element in general not really getting much of anything, over the past year. So because of those factors, I am knocking Earth down here just a tad, and I'm going to have them skirting the line now between my S and my A ranks. And I think that I would say, that they are in danger of probably dropping into an A rank for me, if we actually don't see any significant changes for the element, anytime soon. So again, things that I'm looking for Earth to improve are going to be that max damage vision card. First and foremost, they definitely need one of those. There is definitely a silver lining though, when it comes to Earth and their future outlook. We are anticipating the Earth Warrior of the Crystal, coming into the Japanese side, sometime in the next couple of months. And, by all accounts, he does appear to be a gunner style unit. So maybe another 4-hit chainer that you could slide alongside Summer Lilith and Mustadio and form the core of a really strong Earth missile chaining team. We'll just have to sort of wait and see, what his kit looks like, once he does drop into the game. All right, so after Earth comes Lightning. And right off the bat, you're going to notice this empty spot here at the top. no 4-hit chainers whatsoever when it comes to the lightning elements. And they are actually currently the only element in the game which doesn't have access to any 4-hitters amongst their roster. So right off the bat, that is going to be my knock number 1 when it comes to the lightning elements. We do have some good 3-hit chainers here though. As we talked about in my last guild raid video, 9S and Clown, they are that very solid slash chaining core. Unfortunately, they are both limited time units though. Now the next two here, you're going to notice they have a limit burst icon, on their avatar. And you'll actually see more of these going forward as we progress into some of the other elements. And at least in terms of the infographic, what this icon is telling you is that this particular unit has access to a 3-hit or better limit burst, in their kit. Sadly though, in the case of Lightning and Skahal here, that 3-hit limit burst is actually the only chaining capability that they have in their kit natively. Now rounding out the 3-hit section here for the lightning elements, we're going to have this unit Lisette. And she's actually going to be our next free MR unit. She should be coming maybe sometime in the next month or so, maybe a little bit longer. And she is going to be a huge upgrade for the element, when it comes to guild raids. She actually comes along with the Nightblade subjob, and within that she has access to the Drain Rush skill, which gives her 4 uses of a 3-hit attack. That is certainly going to be even more helpful if you weren't able to pick up some of these limited options here for the lightning element. Aside from that though, not a ton of changes here for lightning. I will say though that the new magic chaining vision card does actually represent a pretty nice upgrade for the elements, with my man Skahal actually being the #1 benefactor for that. If you're actually able to pick up that vision card, I think Skahal is actually going to slide right into your starting 5 for your lightning team. So I think that is pretty exciting, especially for the fans of that unit out there. Now to find out exactly why I say he's going to slide into your team, let's actually take a look at the debuff overview. Now in the last guild raid, the element was really relying on Charlotte for its elemental and peril, and she certainly can still do that for you, but I actually think we have 2 nice new options for it now. Skahal, as we were just talking about, I think it's a great use case for him. He can lead off with that 38% lightning and peril that he has in his kit, and then he can start moving into those 3-hit chains, with the vision card, as well as the limit burst there that we touched on. Now, Lightning from Final Fantasy XIII is another pretty good choice. She does have an elemental imperil on her limit burst, and that limit burst is actually a 3-hit chain as well. Now, Lightning is also one of the few units within the element that has access to a slowing ability on top of that. Prior to her release, we actually had to rely on O if the slow debuff was relevant in the guild raid. And O just is not a good guild raid unit whatsoever. He doesn't have access to any chaining. He can't use any of the vision cards. So thankfully we won't have to do that any longer. Now an agility down debuff I'd say is another little bit of a weakness here for the lightning element, especially if you don't have the Exorcist vision card to sort of help enable Schutzelt and get him into your team. I think that this is another area where the addition of Lisette here in the short future is going to be a big boon for the elements. Defense breaks, that is another debuff weakness. Optimal setups in the past were looking towards using the vision ability of the astrologer card actually to sort of get that defense break onto the enemy. There are a couple of other options within the elements. You can look at units like Nivlu or Orlando, but neither of them I'd say are ideal for guild raid purposes. They're not really great native chainers. In terms of unit or single target resistance and perils, I think that the new vision card is probably going to be the best bet there. Although I think Esther, could actually be a pretty good solution as well, if you have the Exorcist vision card. One area where I think the lightning element is actually doing pretty good right now is with slash imperils. They actually have 3 different units who can give you that if you need it. And that's definitely going to incentivize you to use that particular damage type, within your guild raid to sort of maximize your damage there. The vision card and summon situation for lightning, no changes here since the last time we spoke. The best summon options are going to be the Scorpion Sentinel and Europa, and Ramu is going to be your max damage vision card, and you can pair that along with Two-Headed Dragon. So where is Lightning going to end up here on my tier lists? Well, the last time I actually had them within the A tier, and to be honest, I think that was probably a pretty generous rating at the time. In my view, though, I do think that their standing is improving. Like I said, we do have Lisette to look forward to here in the short future, and if you were able to grab that new Magic Chaining Vision card, I think Skahal, as we talked about, he does actually become a very nice guild raid unit himself. Now, Final Fantasy XIII's Lightning was another nice boon for the element, specifically for her access to the slow debuff. Remember, though, that limit burst is her only access to a chaining skill, so if you were looking to her as an option on your guild raid team, I definitely would suggest that you have her as your summon holder, and that way you can limit any times that she's taking any single swings on the enemy. So with that said, the lightning elements, they're still going to be very much within my A tier. I do have them sort of inching up here ever so slightly, almost approaching that line there, in between S and A. So things that I'm looking for from lightning, maybe in order to inch up into that S tier and sort of firmly plant themselves there. In addition to that chaining situation being improved and maybe pulling in a 4-hit chainer, I do think that I'm going to need to see a little bit more debuff coverage as well. Some of the debuff options, really aren't all that ideal. All right, let's dive into water next. And right off the bat, very nice chaining situation here for water. As you can see, Titus is leading us off. He is bringing in that 4-hitter on his limit burst. Now, sadly though, he doesn't have access to any other chains, within his kit, so it just sort of stops for him there. But for 3-hitters, we do have Winter Ramada, Farm, Lara, and Glaciella. That is actually the same core that we looked at in my last video. It is a very solid core of chainers. They did actually pick up a huge addition though here just this last week with Chunak. He has a 3-hitter on his limit burst, but also within his main kit as well. So assuming that you have everything, I think with the addition of Chunak, that is going to enable you to potentially either push out Astrius or Titus, depending on the situation. Now, water is actually going to be coming in with a new native chainer, sometime within the next 3 months or so, and that is going to be the new Water Warrior, the Crystal Perine. I actually didn't have room to include her here on the left side, but she is actually going to be coming in about 3 months from now, and I do think that she is another solid addition for your Guild Raid team. In terms of what we have here now, though, I think Chunak is really going to be the new major change for the elements, and he certainly is a very significant and powerful one. As for the new Magic Chaining Vision card, I think Rachess is maybe one of the biggest benefactors of that. She does have a little bit of innate chaining capability. She has some 2-hit chains in her kit, as well as some critical debuffs here that we'll look at in the next section. Rapid fire, guys, we're into water's debuffs. We have a few options for water elements in peril here, and I think if you're going to use it, Farm is probably the best one to use. The other sources of elements in peril here for water are coming on non-damaging attacks. For the slow debuff, Titus, as we talked about, Astrius is another good option there if you don't have him. For an agility break, I think Rachess is going to be your best option. She gets a large 25% agility break. Now, the defense and spirit breaks are actually another nice strength for the water elements, and that is because they actually are both coming on one attack, which is Farm's main chaining attack. So having debuffs that are coming in on a multi-hit attack is definitely a huge advantage for guild raids. It allows you to up your hits, up your chain, and apply those critical debuffs all in one action, which can be very nice for your efficiency and really amp up your total score. And for water in particular, they did also pick up Chunak, and he can actually do very much the same thing. His limit burst is a 3-hitter, and it is bringing that all-important unit resistance in peril. And his is of the 38% variety, which is very, very rare in the game. Now, water does actually have a couple of options for the slash damage type in peril. Both Astrius and Winter Ramada are able to bring that on their limit bursts. And thankfully, we do finally have Winter Ramada's Mastery 2, so she can finally use that and not have it cost her her entire AP bank. Now, there are no changes here, when it comes to the Damage Vision card or the summon types for water. We are still looking at Thanks for the Votes and Leviathan and Siren for those purposes. So where do I have water within my elemental tier list? The last go around, I had them firmly within my S tier, but with the changes that we've talked about, I am actually going to be bumping them up and I'm going to have them crossing into my SS tier. I just think that they're going to be capable of putting up some huge numbers in guild raids, rivaling actually some of the best elements in the game. I'd say this is really on the back of Chunak coming in for the element. He is definitely one of the best guild raid units that we have seen in the game to date. Not only because he natively chains, but because those chains are also carrying very, very strong debuffs along with them. So what areas am I looking at for improvement for water going into the future? I think the biggest issue right now is the reliance on either Titus or Astrius, who are just lacking a little bit when it comes to native chaining capabilities in their kit. Astrius, of course, he only has 2-hit chains, and Titus is just bringing in that single 4-hitter. So in the months to come, I'm going to be looking for a new vision card that maybe can help improve that situation, or maybe just a brand new unit who can come in and replace that key debuffing utility that those two units bring, on top of just having good native chaining available to them. Aside from that, the only real thing I can think of is maybe just some better summons. Leviathan, while it's fine and, it does actually have a decent effect, water overall just doesn't have very many espers at this point to choose from. So, maybe a next level, maybe a multi-hit summon would be very nice for the element as well. And certainly if water is able to pick these things up, I think they certainly could contend for maybe the best element overall for guild raids in the game. All right, guys, we're on to the light element here next. And, as you can see, there are just a ton of options here. And really, it's all going to start at the top with the Queen of Chainers and the Champion of Estrella, and that is Starlight Elena. This is just an incredible guild raid unit. There's no other way to say it. Not only does she have a 3-hitter on her limit burst, but she has 4 uses of a 4-hit chain within her main kit as well. Now backing her up, there is just a ton of good 3-hit chainers here as well. We have Locke, we have the free unit Lucio, El Sorel, and Ramza coming in. Now on top of that, if you have access to the chaining vision cards, you're going to open up a lot of other good options, Summer Kilfei probably being among the better ones. Now in terms of the new magic chaining vision card, I think actually Sakura and Hope both actually become pretty interesting choices here for the light element. They both already have 3-hit chains that are coming in on their limit burst, which they would be able to add to the 2 casts of the 3-hit chains that come along on the vision card. Alright, flashing over to Light's debuffs here. And the main reason that I think Hope or Sakura could be interesting for your light team is that the element previously didn't have any access to a unit resistance down in peril. So having that debuff now and having it come in on a 3-hit attack, I think actually could be fairly compelling. Of course, if you decided to go that direction, your chain would become mixed damage type, which is definitely a trade-off in of itself. Part of the reason why light has actually been so strong for guild raids to this point is that they just have so many slash chainers that they can keep the chain pure through the entire fight. As the guild raids are progressing though, they are actually adding in more defensive mitigation and resistances to these bosses, which actually can make it a little bit more difficult to chain and cap with slash damage. And I do imagine they are going to continue with that trend just to devalue all of these slash chainers and maybe try to sell you on some new damage type chains. Now for a light and peril, look no further than my man Lucio. He's going to have that 38% to light on his limit burst. Summer Kilfei is another nice option for that. She also brings that on her limit burst. And she is actually also a very nice option for your slow effect. Now Elena is going to have your agility debuff on lockdown. As we said for water, having key debuffs which are coming on a multi-hit attack is definitely a huge competitive advantage. Now Ramza is coming in here with his EX jobs. He's actually an excellent guild raid unit in his own right. His EX Shimmering Blade is going to debuff both defense and spirit for you, and that is going to be nice for 2 reasons. First, you're going to be able to work in that spirit debuff, which in the past, till now has been very difficult to do, and that has dampened Elena's damage, just a little bit, especially on her 4-hit attack Iridescent Blade. Now having that also come along with the defense debuff as well will actually free up your Violet to become just a pure chainer at that point. She actually has enough casts of 3-hit chains to go through the entire fight. Now in terms of a max damage vision card, actually a significant upgrade for the light element is with the Final Fantasy XIII event. They did pick up Hope's new vision card. Actually everybody grabbed this one for free, but you actually did have to get the shards for it to finish it off. Prior to this, light actually did have to use an MR vision card in order to increase its max damage along with the 2-headed dragon. So in terms of their guild raid scores, just tack another 500 damage per hit on there for light, and we're going to be seeing some crazy scores there for the element. Now in terms of summons, Valifor, which came along with Final Fantasy X, he's the de facto choice, but if you weren't able to grab him, you could certainly use Carbuncle as well. So where do I have the light element on my tier list? Well, in my last video, they were actually the only element that I had in my SS tier. They were capable of out-damaging, several other elements, even if that enemy wasn't innately weak to light. Now here today, a couple months later, I do think that that is still going to be the case for a couple of the elements here in the list, but I do think that we are overall getting to a better place of parity, amongst the various elements. Certainly there are a couple here which are better than the others, but everybody is sort of inching up and sort of maybe getting to a closer spot to one another. In terms of light though, no doubt it's going to be remaining in my SS tier. Even though they've just had a couple of minor enhancements, number 1 is definitely going to be that vision card. I'd say that they were just so far ahead of the pack last time around that I'd say that even those minor things are more than enough to sort of keep them standing firm where they are. At this point though, what else am I looking for the light element, in terms of guild raids? Well, to be honest, they really don't need all that much. The last time around, one of the main things they did need was that vision card. We do have that now. At this point, I'd say they really represent the pinnacle of slash chaining for guild raids in the game. But, you know, assuming that Gumi sort of continues that trend and really tries to dampen slash damage in these types of raids, I think that that could very quickly become a weakness for the light elements in that they don't really have a lot of options, you know, outside of that slash damage type. So, you know, at this point, I think that branching out maybe into some other damage types for their chains probably would be the best direction to go for the light element. And I think it just makes the most sense and I think is the most logical direction as well. All right, guys, our last element here is dark. And we actually have a couple of new additions here for dark since my last video. And that's all starting with Dark Fina. She's coming in with a 4-hit attack on her limit burst, very similar to Titus. Unfortunately though, she only has 2-hit chains to fall back on, you know, after she has used that. In terms of 3-hitters here for Dark, we did actually pick up Renelle. She is a free MR unit for everyone, and you know, you can find her in the Farplane archives. And she instantly becomes one of the best options for Dark when it comes to guild raids alongside Shadowlynx, who was actually one of the original chainers in War of the Visions. When it comes to native chainers though, that is really where things start to dry up for Dark. You know, the element has, you know, quite a few options for 2-hitters, you know, which is fine, but you know, it really isn't all that great. I'd say the element is in dire need at this point of some additional 3-hit chainers to pair alongside Renelle and Lynx. Now that vision ability that we just got from the new vision card, you know, certainly would help them out quite substantially in my view. And overall as an element, you know, they really are relying heavily on these vision cards in order to field, you know, a competitive team. If you do happen to have the vision cards though, you know, it does open up some pretty decent options for you. I would say the original Stern is definitely one of the better ones, you know, alongside Dwayne. He's actually pretty decent too. For the new card, you know, I think that Dark Fina will be actually a pretty nice upgrade for the element. You know, she will have 2 casts of the 3 hits that she can get from the vision card, and she can add that to the 4 hit that she gets on her limit burst. And I do believe that actually will slot Dark Fina into your starting Dark team when it comes to guild raids, which is kind of cool. In terms of debuffs for Dark, you know, I'd say they're in a pretty decent spot overall. We have coverage, you know, for pretty much everything that you could want or need here. And that's going to include single target resistance. You know, even prior to the new vision card, they actually had a few options for that actually. Shadowlynx, Dark Fina, and Ziza, you know, all have access to that. In terms of the main elemental in peril, you know, both Dwayne and Prompto have access to those within their kit. If you have access to Dwayne though, and the Gift Like No Other card, you definitely want to lean towards him. You know, he brings that 38% stronger in peril, and of course he can fall back on those 3-hit chains, which Prompto does not have access to. Now, when the soldier job gets upgraded for us here in Global, Stern will actually be seeing a very nice upgrade. A slow effect is going to be added on to his Job 25 ability. Now, of course, that ability is already bringing a large slash in peril today, so it is actually going to become a very, very strong debuff here in a couple of months. Now, until that happens, you know, in terms of slow, you can look towards either Prompto or Kane. They both have that in their kits. Now, in terms of an agility break, Renelle is definitely going to be your best option there. In terms of defense breaks, the element actually has several different options there. It kind of depends on what you have access to. Now, unfortunately for Dark, you know, they actually have no pure elemental max damage vision card. The 2-headed dragon card is actually classified as a Dark card, even though the max damage party buff is multi-element effective. So that is definitely a current drawback for Dark. They do have to stack this with an MR card, which would be the Mind Flayer card currently. Now, in terms of the summons for Dark, they do actually have a couple of nice options. The more recently released Anima and the Omega one is an older one. Both of them are very, very solid. So where is Dark going to be sitting, you know, in the grand scheme of things? Well, you know, the last time around, they were actually the bottom of the barrel. They were sitting in my B tier. I'd say, though, that Renelle and the power of the new Nightmare Before Halloween vision card, I think those things do infuse enough power into the element for me to kind of bump them up just into the A tier. Unfortunately, though, I think that they still are just the worst element, you know, overall when it comes to guild raids and sort of comparing them amongst the other field of elements. The element is just hugely lacking, you know, when it comes to chainers of 3 hits or better, and that is really the main thing that I'm looking for Dark to improve its standing here on the tier list. Of course, a max damage vision card, you know, would certainly help as well, so I would definitely be looking for one of those. Dark, though, does have a new unit that has been announced. The Dark Warrior of the Crystal actually will be coming into the game on the Japanese side very, very soon. So we'll definitely have to take a look at her kit as well when she drops and see if she is actually going to bring any new chaining capabilities for the elements. I think at this point they definitely could use it. Alright guys, so there it is. We did the rundown of all the elements once again with what their capabilities are and where they stand in the current guild raid hierarchy. These cheat sheets ended up being a huge project for me, and I really didn't know what I was getting myself into when I started it. But I do think they actually came out pretty good, and I really do hope that they're going to be helpful for you guys out there and trying to push your scores even higher than you ever have before. So again, I will be putting links to these cheat sheets in the description below. Feel free to grab those, share them amongst your friends, into your guilds, discords, and amongst the community at large. I did make these for you guys out there, so definitely enjoy and use them. Now personally, I think that guild raids are just a ton of fun. It is one of the few areas that we have in the game where we can come together with our guilds and sort of collaborate and compete towards a common goal, which I always really like. So hit me up in the comments down below if you saw anything today that you think that I missed, and definitely come back and drop a comment on the video after guild raids are over, and let me know about your scores. I'd really love to hear about those too. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, and if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.